Hello and welcome back to Hive Prometheus. Today I want to do a little bit of a roundup of all of the news and the reveals that we've had for the upcoming 11th edition of Warhammer that is going to come out in about 10 weeks. We have some intel or leaks that shows that it should be coming out in between June 11th to June 21st. That puts us about 10 weeks out from today, April 11th. And it's honestly getting me pretty excited. I've gone back to making my templates for the layouts. I'm painting my terrain that I haven't done for years at this point, and I'm preparing some models that I probably should have ever since last summer when Subterranean Assault came out. I had some unassembled Raveners that I hadn't worked on, and they're basically finished. I just have to put on the carapace color, and they are finished. A couple of the reveals were maps that are going to be in the upcoming matchups between the different dispositions of the armies. I'll touch upon the dispositions a little bit just to see what is probably going to be some of the stronger archetypes or builds for Tyranids going forward. And also, I think an important thing is planning for the next edition. If you don't have a large collection like I do, what models can you get to set yourself up for success upon the edition launch? And I'll go into why I think the strengths and weaknesses of those units are going to lend to a better gameplay experience right out the gate. So first and foremost, the biggest thing that I want to go over, that is the biggest change in my opinion, is that GW is doing away with the circle templates for objective markers. They are now making it so that the narrative and competitive play are sort of fusing together a little bit more. They want to make the battlefields look a little bit better. The designers of the team who have designed this edition said that they didn't like the thematic look of the objective markers on the field just being big circles. So they're now making it the terrain footprints. As you can see here, the home objectives are marked with a little castle icon in your friendly territory. And then there are, in this example, 3 objectives in the midfield marked with a skull icon. And as we can see here, the surface area is so much larger. You'll be able to pile on more models for OC to contest these objectives, and I think removing those models, either by shooting or melee, is going to be a lot more of a tempo gameplay, kind of like playing chess, than it has been thus far. In a lot of these cases, the expansion objectives, your natural expansion, the one closest to your territory, is only a couple inches away. It can be taken by something that can move very slowly, and it can even tow onto the footprint if it is a large vehicle or something with a large base. Similarly, the expansion objectives and the center objective are much closer to your starting territory. You'll be able to get there with something with as little as 6 inches of movement and tow on. It's really going to make it so that things that had high movement in this edition, things like Tauroxes and Guard, Eldar, Blood Angels, which I think are postured to do very well this edition just because of how infantry are going to be favored with the lurking rules. Is going to be very interesting. So that was the Crucible map. This is the Dawn of War style map. As you can see, same thing. You know, your expansion objective is less than an inch outside your territory, maybe exactly an inch. And then the center objective here is only about an 8-inch move to the center. A lot of people pointed out that the terrain feels kind of crunched or smushed towards the middle a whole lot, and I think that's just going to force interaction in the game. It potentially make games go faster. I don't know if we're going to be seeing as many high-scoring games unless you save a lot of your secondary cards. Speaking of which, that is another change that's been coming in the edition, whereas previously in 10th edition you could only draw 2 secondary cards, and at the end of a battle round or the beginning of your command phase, if you're unable to score, you could discard it for a CP. Now you're allowed to hold on to those objectives until you want to score them. The only penalty or requirement is that you can only score 15 of those secondary points per turn. Similarly, you can only score 15 primary per turn. So it caps a maximum scoring turn, so it forces you to at least have some interaction with the game minimally over 3 rounds. I think this is a welcome change. I think it makes it a lot more dynamic on the decision making on whether or not you want to keep your secondary cards. It leaves a lot more dynamic gameplay and decisions to be made from the get-go. Similarly, we've had some new primary missions revealed. Now, the primary is going to be determined by the dispositions of your army. So let's say I have a Purge the Foe type disposition. I have an aggressive Vanguard Onslaught, Subterranean Assault, maybe Invasion Fleet style list, and I'm going into a Genestealer Cult opponent who has a Disruption style disposition. Those dispositions are a little bit on a matrix, and they will determine what your mission is. In this case, the first card that we see is Punishment. It incentivizes you to condemn enemy units, almost like marked for death, which is pretty interesting. If you control one or more of your objectives, excluding your home objective, you get 4 victory points, and if you control more objectives than your opponent, you score 5. So it's a little bit of a mix of mark for death and Purge the Foe of hold 1, hold more, kill 1, kill more. It also has a conditional end of battle victory point bonus that if you hold your opponent's home objective, you get 8 victory points. So this really lends itself to pushing out, killing things, holding more objectives than your opponent, being expansionist, and eventually, at the end of the battle, holding your opponent's home field objective. Pretty cool, pretty interesting. One of the other ones that we had revealed is Death Trap. I'll leave that up for people to read because reading through all that is a little strange. But in the specific matchup that they showed between the Disruption, Army Disposition, and the Take and Hold mission, there is some counterplay built into the primary missions. I think that these were very well designed if you actually look into them. I'm going to flip over to the Take and Hold one, which is the opposite mission for this disposition, Determine Acquisition. So as you can see here, for each objective that you control that you did not control at the start of the turn, and then conditionally on each of the preceding battle rounds after the second, you can see that for each objective you control, you score a bonus, and then for objectives that were within your opponent's territory, meaning past the halfway point, that does not include the center one because it's not wholly within your opponent's territory, you score an additional 3. So this also has a bonus condition for being aggressive. I think that this edition is really going to reward high-risk gameplay, things that can move in, kill something, take, and then trade out. I think that things are going to be dying quicker, but you're going to be scoring more points. So this is kind of the reason why I think that games are going to be going faster. With that being said, I know I've probably missed a few things. I didn't go super in-depth to the army dispositions. You can find that on any of the Warhammer community articles. The specific interactions with terrain, I do think that they are specifically on maps now showing you that the green icons on terrain are more than 4 inches and will not be able to have monsters and vehicles move through it unless you have a special rule that allows you to, like knights or something of that sort. The yellow terrain is less than 2 inches. That will allow monsters and vehicles to move over it without penalty. There are a couple things that I am still looking to see if they do change. There is a rumor that flying units will be able to move over terrain with as little as a 2-inch penalty, which I think would lend itself a lot better to some of our units that have suffered. Our Winged Hive Tyrant in 9th edition used to be able to move 17 inches with the Druid Glance. It got cut down to 12, and with the terrain rules in 10th edition, him trying to move over a building really only yielded about 5 or 6 inches of movement. I think that he has been missed this edition, but allowing him to move over terrain now and still keep 10 inches of movement, I think is a lot more dynamic for him, especially on a round base. He can pivot for free. So there's some things I'm still assuming for this edition, but the thing that I think some people are worried about specifically is one of the new models we got in 10th edition was the Norn Emissary. Norns in 10th edition have had multiple instances where we can tow onto objectives and still be completely obscured behind a footprint. So we eliminate at least partially on turn 1 or 2 if you're being very defensive on your expansion objective, not being shot by your opponent. Usually melee and shooting has to come to you. Now, going back and looking at those footprints for those terrain objectives, I think as soon as a Norn steps into those, unless he has some sort of minimized lurking or obscuring rule, as soon as he touches that objective, he's going to be seen from anything that has line of sight to that footprint. I really wonder if GW is trying to cut down on defensive playstyles and lean more towards aggressive playstyles. This makes me think now that unless the Norn goes down in points, 20, 25, 30 points, because the survivability of him is going to be less. So, to finish out the conversation, I don't know necessarily how we are going to be doing defensively as an army, but I do think we need to lean more into an aggressive archetype. I think units like Gene Stealers, Von Ryan Sleepers, Lictors, Death Leaper, Screamer Killers, maybe even Harvespexes if they increase their movement in the Codex. Anything that can reach out and kill even a 5-man group of Marines or the rough equivalent, I think is going to have some play. Now, again, we usually have to spend 50% more points to trade up and kill the same thing, to kill something of a similar point value. But that's fine. A lot of people have been worried about whether or not shooting is going to be viable at all this edition. If you go and look back at those maps, there are places that you can tow out, place your gun like an Exocrine or a Tyranid, and you have line of sight to pretty much anything straight down to the end of your opponent's deployment. There are better ways to hide your units in this, but I think as soon as you come out to the midfield, things will have line of sight. So I think people who are leaning away from the idea of like Exocrines are going to be bad and our long range shooting is going to be bad, just move them up. Like, there's going to be so much going on. I think you just need to experiment with the idea that if you overload your opponent and they don't have really good target acquisition, they're not going to be able to kill everything. Yes, I know Tyranids are not the most tanky things, and other armies have innately higher AP, but here's the thing that I think is cool. We'll suffer a -1 ballistic skill shooting into cover, but we're going to preserve our AP. This is very big for Maliceptors. AP2 originally shooting into cover, and Marines get AOC essentially just meant AP0. They're going to keep their AP2, and now if they Armor of Contempt is going to be AP1. Exocrines keep their AP3. Tyranifex keeps their AP4 on the Rupture Cannon. I also think that if there's going to be a lot of little 5-man squads of things running around, having Acid Fexes so that you can Overwatch and kill those and have potentially 2 turns of shooting with Overwatch in a battle round is going to be really good. Now, is he overpointed for 200 points? Yeah, maybe. He might come down to like 185. But I think he's going to be a really good option to take out those little tech pieces that are going to be running around and doing actions, kind of like what we want to do with like 5-man Gene Stealers and 3-man Von Ryan Sleepers. But there's probably a lot I've left out, but I don't want to be overly wordy. As things release, I do want to continue to give updates. Hopefully, we get enough rules that we can start loading in these map assets into TTS. We actually do have somebody on the server who has built one of the maps that I showed you previously, and there's one other person who has built both the maps. They are functional, so if you wanted to sort of practice a 10.5 style edition for the remaining weeks before the 11th release, you can. I also have gone ahead and cut out the new footprints, and I've used some texture spray paint to spray paint them and then dry brush, and they look a lot better. They actually look like a muddy battlefield as opposed to the stale black footprints I had in battle reports previously. So trying to upgrade little things, trying to get better, trying to elevate my play, and hopefully I can spread that to you as well. So I just want to thank you again for coming by. I'll catch you next time on Hive Prometheus.